Well, if you're listening to this on the date that it comes out, Merry Christmas. You will have just experienced Christmas. I am recording this well before that because I will be hanging out with friends and family on that day. But if you are listening during that season, then I know that you're probably planning and excited and thinking about 2024 and what that looks like for your business, which is an exciting thing to do, especially when hopefully businesses calm down a little bit for you unless you're like doing Boxing Day sales or something in your business. And it's a time to really reflect and plan what you want for the year. And thinking about your branding in this time is actually a really great way to spend it. And so great job for listening. And I hope this episode will be helpful for you. So I want to chat to you about how you can create your own brand style guide, whether you are going to hire a designer to do that or whether you're going to do it yourself. These are some things you want to make sure you're knowing and thinking about. This is probably more targeted at the DIYer, but it still is helpful to know, especially if you are wanting to make sure you take advantage of a style guide a designer might give you as well. So let's dive in. Amazing. So thank you so much for joining me. My name is Jacqui and I am a graphic designer, and I'm so excited that I get to help you with this topic in particular because I think style guides and style brand guides, like brand guides, whatever you kind of want to call it, brand style guide. I'm going to use brand style guide. I think that's the most succinct way to do this. Can be a little bit of a mystical file. It can be something, if you've ever worked with a designer, hopefully if they've sent you one of these, and pretty much it's a guide, a PDF, usually a little multi-page document, if you will, that sets up what your brand is, particularly your visual brand, and expanding a little bit more into some other questions around your brand as well. And it's a really great way for you to be able to have this consistent thing in your business and in your brand. So pretty much a style guide will lay out, I'm going to go through this in more detail through that podcast episode, will lay out what your brand should actually look like and how it should come across. Because if you've paid for a brand or you've spent some time DIYing a brand, then you're going to want to make sure that the brand that you've created actually sticks because you've actually spent time considering it properly. And a brand style guide is going to help you to use that consistently. It's going to help your team to use that consistently. And it's going to help you to have this really overarching and strong view of what your brand is and should be. And so this brand style guide is going to help you to do that. And it's going to help you on the visual level, and it's going to help you on more of a brand strategy level as well. And the reason we want to really push into that brand consistency is that if you've done all the research for your branding, then you want to make sure you're using that consistently. And the power of consistency is probably two or threefold, but one reason is that the message that you're putting out into the world is consistent, so that when someone comes across your social media, or they might go to your website, or they might go to your flyer, or whatever that is, whatever that touch point is for them in your business, that it's the same and that messaging is the same and that it makes sense to them. And it also means that throughout time, like whether they're looking at your business in January or whether they're looking at business in June, unless you've had a giant rebrand in that time, that is still consistent. Your message is the same, your graphics are the same. And it also means that they can begin to form this loyalty, this recognition of your brand. Like I have so many people that recognize me for my purple color because I use it everywhere, to the point where they send me like pictures of clothing and stuff and like cute little knickknacks for my desk. Like, oh, Jacqui, you should get this because it's purple, because they've recognized that as my brand. And while you might not have a visual color that's quite as strong as mine, what it does mean is that people are starting to recognize you. And so whether that's when they're scrolling in their social media feed and they recognize your style or your fonts or your look, or whether they see your sign in a storefront or whatever it is, they're beginning to recognize you and beginning to form a connection with you and form a relationship with you visually, where they actually begin to trust you and your business. And so this power of consistency is really, really great in your business. And having a really clear style guide will help you to stick with that consistency. It means that whether you're the one designing your graphics, it means that you can actually just make sure that you're always obeying those. Also, just a bonus tip, setting up your Canva brand style guide. Please make sure you're doing that if you're using Canva Pro. And that will just help you to make sure you're using the same colors, the same fonts, the same look over and over again. And it's also really powerful if you're using any team or any contractors for your graphics or for your brand or for your business, whether you're hiring a designer and then you're hiring a website designer and then you're passing things over to your VA to do for social media. If they all are working from the same style guide, then you're going to be able to have this really consistent and cohesive look. Then they're knowing what your whole brand is about at a glance, really, really easily and consistently, because this brand style guide shouldn't just be fonts and colors. It should also be your brand mission and values. We're going to talk about each of those different parts in a moment. So making sure that you're thinking through those things and asking yourselves the right questions so that you can place and put together this document that you can send out and can be useful for anyone and everyone in your business. And it can be something that everyone refers to and is always on the same page. So let's get into it. So first thing, brand style guide. Set something up in a program that you feel comfortable in, whether that's, for me, I love to use Canva. It's a document where I can create, I usually do like a nice landscape PDF just on an A4 document if you're in Australia, or letter, or even presentation slide size. So like 1920 by 1080 pixels wide and big and high and all those things. And if you use those kind of dimensions, it just means that it's a really great, easy document to hand around to people. They can see it on their computer screen really easily. Or if it's going to be printed out, you might want to do a more portrait kind of version. Doesn't really matter. The point of the matter is it's a large enough page that you can actually fit enough text and imagery on that it doesn't feel cramped. Like I wouldn't do like a small social media post size for a brand style guide. I would do that A4 kind of size. And then you can make that, as I said, in Canva or like whatever else you're using. If you're a designer, you might want to use like Adobe InDesign, or you might want to use Adobe Illustrator. Or if you're just not wanting to use Canva for your business and you don't know any of those fancy programs, you could always use like Word or PowerPoint, I guess, or Publisher. Is that still a thing? But I really would recommend just using something like Canva if you're already using that for your business, because it's just everything is there and it makes it so much easier. Create just a nice plain page to start off with, like business name, brand style guide, maybe even the date if you know it might date into the future, so that to help people know that this is the current one or this is the one that you're using right now. And then at first I want to preface this by saying that there's no particular order that you might want to do this in. Like some people like to put the brand strategy stuff at the start. Some people like to put the more graphic designy stuff at the start. Either way, it doesn't really matter. Do what makes sense for you. For me, I do a bit of a mix of both. Probably I usually start with the brand strategy stuff, but I'm going to start with the brand visual stuff this time, just because that's the way I love to talk about it. But yeah, you've got your cover page, and you might want to do a table of contents. Obviously, you might want to add that in at the end so that you know actually what you're creating a table of contents around, but just a content so that someone can flick to the different pages as needed. You might also want to add in page numbers. Canva at the time of recording this doesn't have an easy way to do page numbers, so it is a manual process. Again, go back and do that at the end. Do not do it at the start, or you will really frustrate yourself with having to reorder pages as you kind of change things around as you're creating it. All right, so some things to include in your style guide, in your brand guide, is as follows. Firstly, your logos. You want to make sure that you're sharing what your actual logos are. You might want to put in, for example, your main logo. And then if you've worked with me, if you've worked in my DIY designer course, or you've worked in my studio, you won't just be getting one logo. And if you're DIYing for yourself, please don't just create one logo. I've got a whole episode on this on YouTube for tutorials. I think it's called Don't Do This. Actually, no, that's what's on the thumbnail. It'll be something around logo design. So search that on YouTube and you'll be able to find that. But in essence, you want a logo that's your main logo. You also want your sub logo, so it might be a different orientation of your logo. Say you've got a stacked logo, a square logo, a long logo, all those different variations. Pop them there so people know that they exist, and make sure when I do my Canva style guides, I actually put in a link to a OneDrive folder or a Google Drive folder or a Dropbox folder where those files are actually housed, so someone can actually go in to that folder and find those logo files that are listed in this PDF and use them for your business. And so that's really a great tip to save time as well. So those logo variations, whether it's just you've got your icon by itself, you've got the text by itself, you've got different color variations, popping all of those in there so it's really clear of what's available for someone to use for your business, and also putting in maybe how to use it. Like, for example, you might not want to use your logo on a really busy background because it gets really cluttered and looks really yuck. You might not want to stretch your logo. You might not want to put things too close to your logo and cramp it. Feel free to write in here or give some examples of good and bad ways to use your logo as well. The next thing you want to add in is your colors. So this is your color palette. You could do as simple as just putting a couple little circles of your colors and that's it. Or you could go more into it. I like to do for my studio, we do a more in-depth look into the colors. So you might want to add in, it's probably quite important to add in at least the hex codes if you're an online business, the hex codes of your colors. So that's a little 6-digit and letter combination of colors. You can find that just in Canva. If you click on the color, it will tell you what hex code it is. Adding that number in with a little hashtag at the start helps anyone to always know which color you're referring to. Or if you're doing printing a lot, you might want to look up the Pantone colors. I want to add in the CMYK colors, all those different color codes. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't stress. Hopefully your designer will do this for you, or if you don't need it, you don't need it. Then you might also want to add in some different rules around those colors. So for my business, for example, I have different colors that go really well together. I have different rules that I use for doing my text colors. Like I don't often use black for text, but sometimes I do. And here are the reasons and why when I use black. I usually use white for text. and so writing out when that happens, but writing out that actually we don't use white for text when we're using the light blue background because that's not visible. So I usually just write out different rules around how to use those colors well together, and maybe like different situations where those colors might be used. So you might use a color particularly on this kind of project or in this kind of heading or in this kind of situation or in this kind of post, and just writing out those rules to help you use those colors consistently if you're the one doing the designs, or help your team use those colors consistently too. This stuff takes a moment to think about, but especially if you've done actual designs in your business and you begin to notice a pattern for how you're using the colors over and over again, how you're using different things over, it means that you can actually just pop those into the style guide and it can just be done really consistently. And that's a point that I want to make too, is when you're making your style guide, make sure you've used your brand a few times to check what you're putting in the style guide is accurate. So say, for example, when we make a style guide for in our studio for different businesses, I usually encourage my designers, let's actually create their social media posts or their presentation slides first, so we can actually learn how the brand looks and how the brand actually works, give it legs. It's all well and good to say, these are the fonts and these are the colors, but if you haven't actually used those in practice, are they correct? Does it actually work? And so using those things first and then creating the rules off the practical uses of those, I think, can be helpful. Oh, hello. I'm interrupting this episode super quickly to let you know that we have limited availability to work with the team at White Deer Studio. If you want done for you graphic or brand support, that means doing your graphics for you, anything from bespoke social media templates to launch graphics or a full branding package, our team are ready to support you. Just head to whitedeer.com.au/design studio to find out more. That's the color white, the animal deer.com.au/design studio to find out more. We cannot wait to work with you. All right, back to the episode. All right, next up is your fonts or your typography if you want to get in the fancy designer language. I always tend to use language that everyday people can understand by using fonts and colors rather than typography. Blah, 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 blah. Instead of sounding all high and mighty, I just use everyday words. And so for your fonts, you might want to lay out what your fonts are. So I really recommend having 2 to 3 fonts for your business. You might have 4, usually no more than that, but sometimes businesses can work around it. But 2 to 4 is a good number. 3 is my favorite. And writing down not just what the fonts are, but again, like the colors when they're used. Like this is the main heading font. This is the main what I call an accent font. So when you're doing a little scribble off to the side or like a subheading, or this is the main font you use for body text. But these are also the variations, like the bold version, or we always use the italics version when we're talking like this, or like whatever that is. Like try to write in and think about all the nuances around you using your fonts. And so writing down the different uses of those and how they kind of get worked out. After you do fonts, you might also want to put in some rules around imagery. So if you've had a brand photo shoot, feeling free to pop in some of those photos from the brand photo shoot into that style guide so you can begin to see the vibe of the photos, and that maybe if you're ever getting photos taken in the future, you can have a similar vibe, or if you want to shift it up, you can. Or if someone's going to go in and use your brand photos for your business, they can see, oh, this is a bit of a range of what's available. Again, having a link that goes to a drive that has all these photos in it, such a time saver. So having those available is helpful. Or if you're using stock imagery, showing the kind of examples of stock imagery that you might use. Like if you're going to use if your brand is really dark and moody, have examples of those dark and moody stock photos. Because if, as a designer, if I was to come into your business and I didn't know, I might Google like light and airy stock photos that are like got lots of white space and really modern and beautiful. And then you might be like, no, I like using really dark, moody kind of photos. And it's like, oh, okay, that's good to know that. So having a bit of a vibe of the kind of photos that you use in your business can be helpful. Next, you want to chat about some more of the more brand strategy things. So things that aren't just related to the visuals of your brand, but also the strategy side, because that's also really important. You don't have to include these things. You can include whatever the heck you want, really. But this is a guide, and I hope that's useful for you, because when you have more of these things, the more time you spend actually pushing and fleshing this out, the more clarity you have as a business owner, and the more clarity anyone that's working for you has about your business. And they can create things for your business that are going to really stick in line with your business and what it stands for. And so some things to think about in this stage is like your tone of voice, your personality. Are you more of a relaxed and playful brand, or you're a more corporate structured brand? Are you quite a professional feel but with an edge of humor, or are you a really helpful brand, or are you a really motivational brand? Thinking through your tone of voice and adding examples of that in there, just adding buzzwords in, writing a bit of a description around it, that can be useful to make sure that everyone else that works for you is always on the same page. Another thing you might want to include is your target audience. So you can You could just write a paragraph around your main target audience, or you could even go so far as giving some audience and an ideal client customer personas, or giving some examples of, this is my ideal client, this is what they like, this is what they don't like, this is their gender, this is where they're located, this is their income bracket, this is their struggles, this is their pain points, this is their dreams, whatever it is. Getting really specific around that stuff, again, helps anyone else working for your brand or your business to get some real clarity in that. And it also helps you to do that too. If you've kind of put off this stage, hopefully you've done it in the brand creation process. Hopefully you've thought about all of these things in the brand creation process. And so when you're actually going to put on the style guide, you've actually thought about these things. So it's just a matter of putting it on paper rather than starting from scratch. In fact, that would be a big no-no, is starting from scratch at this point on these questions, because your brand probably won't align with those things. Your visuals won't align with those things. So these are questions you're going to be thinking through before you create your brand, and then you're just putting them into the style guide so that it's accessible for everyone, and a reminder for yourself too. So your tone of voice, your brand personality, your audience, and who your business exists to serve. And the answer isn't everyone. Your business can't serve everyone really well. So who is it really existing to serve? You might also want to talk about your brand's mission, its values, its purpose. Like, why does your business exist, and who does it exist to help, and why is it even here? And also, what's its vision for the future? Like, where is it pushing into? What are its big goals? Do you want to help 1,000 incredible women business owners by 2025 to reach X income goal? If you're a business coach, I guess that could be relevant. And so putting out some big mission and vision and stuff as well can help anyone be really aligned to that's working for you. And also your values. Like, are you someone that values flexibility and fun and playfulness? Or are you someone that values diversity and trust and transparency? Like, what are your business's values? Because that will help to shape things too. And so those are some of the main things to think about. There's obviously more that you could write in here, but I think that's a really great base summary. And this document can end up being, it could be anywhere from 10 pages long to 30 pages long. There's no right or wrong answer here. But the final thing you want to put in here that I don't want to forget too is mockups. This is just share examples of your designs. If you've created some social media posts that you're really enjoying, pop some examples of social media posts in there. If you've got your podcast cover or your presentation slides or your worksheets, or like whatever you've created visually for your business, put some screenshots, put some designs in there so that when anyone's looking at your business and your graphics, they can begin to see a bit of an example of how things are actually fleshed out in reality, because there's all well and good to have a list of the fonts and a list of the colors and a list of the logos, but seeing them actually in reality gives the most context to actually how your designs will look. So have a play with that and create this guide, and it can be something that you don't have to touch again for as long as until you rebrand, and it's something that you can just have on file rather than wishing like, oh, what are my colors again? Oh, what are my fonts again? Oh, I really wish I could just give this one document over to someone so they just understood the heart of my business, or could just design this for me, or could just create that for me. And so having this document is really helpful. Obviously, if you work with me at the studio, we will create this document for you in our higher brand packages. So totally hit us up if you're interested in that. But if you're also like, just remembering too that listening to this podcast is probably actually nearly enough if you know this stuff for your own business, and start to just write that out. It doesn't even have to be incredibly designed at the start. Even if for those more brand strategy side of things, like your brand voice, your mission and everything, even just on a Word document or a Google Doc, that's okay. So I challenge you maybe over this holiday break to take some time and think through, do I have a brand style guide? Do I have a brand guide that I can give people to them to access, and that I can have heaps of clarity in my own business to use and create with and reference? And so have fun creating that. There's no right or wrong way to do this. It's all about building as much as you can into it to gain as much clarity as you can. And then once you're done, that Canva design, save it as a PDF, send it to anyone that's on your team or anyone future on your team, save it to your files, save it to your project management system, and have that accessible, ready to go for all of your future uses. So thank you for joining me today. Have fun working on that. You can either do it, you could literally pull this together in a day, or you can spend some time really fleshing it out. But like I said, if you've created your brand, you will hopefully have thought through all of these things already. It's just a matter of putting it on paper. So have fun doing that. And thank you for joining me for another episode. If you enjoyed this one, feel free to leave me a review or share me with some friends. I would love to help this podcast get into the hands of more incredible business owners. In the meantime, I guess I'll see you in 2024. Bye.